No século XVI, os nativos americanos combateram e derrotaram brutalmente os poderosos conquistadores espanhóis. Quem eram essas pessoas e como realizaram esta façanha? Alguns arqueólogos sugerem que estes montes possuem a resposta. Junte-se a mim enquanto remo pelo rio, construo minha própria pirâmide e mergulho em águas gélidas e turvas para solucionar o mistério das pirâmides da América. Estamos em busca da verdade e não mediremos esforços para encontrá-la.
I think I may have taken this too far.
Em busca da verdade. Em 1539, os espanhóis desembarcaram na Flórida para iniciar a conquista da América do Norte. Liderados por Hernando de Soto, conquistador do Império Inca, eles pretendiam encontrar ouro e prata, assim como estabelecer a primeira colônia espanhola no norte do México. Em quase 2 anos viajando pelo Sudeste, os conquistadores disseminaram a destruição entre os nativos, capturando ou matando-os pelo caminho. Mas, ao avançarem para o oeste, as vilas nativas começaram a resistir e a revidar. Então, em 1543, o conflito transformou-se em uma batalha épica sobre a água.
This bayou is just a few miles east of the Mississippi River. It was in this region where the battle reached its peak. Hi, I'm Josh Bernstein. I've come to western Mississippi to explore how the natives in this region were able to launch a sustained attack against the Spanish and effectively send them fleeing to the Gulf of Mexico.
Sabemos que isso ocorreu, pois alguns sobreviventes da expedição de Soto escreveram suas experiências. São as únicas provas descrevendo as pessoas que os expulsaram. Os relatos mencionam vilas construídas entre grandes montes em forma de pirâmide, ao longo das margens do Mississippi.
Who were these people, and how did they stand up to De Soto's army when the natives to the east did not?
Meu objetivo é aprender sobre as pessoas que construíram e viveram entre essas pirâmides. Minha jornada começa pela última região de pirâmides que foi ocupada nos Estados Unidos, localizada em Natchez, Mississippi. Os historiadores acreditam que a civilização em Natchez tenha nascido por volta de 700 d.C. e durado mais de 1000 anos. Para saber mais sobre essa cultura, vou me encontrar com o Falcão Cinza, descendente dos índios Natchez.
Okay.
O Falcão Cinza me leva para dentro de uma tradicional cabana nativa para fumarmos o cachimbo da amizade. Cabanas de sapê como esta há muito testemunham cerimônias de boas-vindas e paz.
When you smoke the pipe, it's a pipe of prayer, it's a pipe of peace, and a pipe of friendship. And when our smoke comes out and it goes up to the Creator, that's our prayer going to the Creator. We can actually watch it, and then that means that if we lie to each other, we don't have to face each other, we have to face the Creator, because that's where the prayers and the words are going to.
But if we tell the truth to each other, we just enjoy the service.
We just enjoy the service.
Okay.
O Falcão Cinza explica que o tabaco que vamos fumar é do mesmo tipo usado pelos nativos do século XVII. A planta de origem ainda é considerada sagrada. Para um nativo americano, compartilhar o cachimbo da amizade é um grande sinal de respeito. Se De Soto e seus homens tivessem abordado os Natchez de forma pacífica, teriam sido recebidos da mesma forma.
So now we can talk as friends.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with you? Tell me about you and your people.
I'm Houma Indian, and we are people of the Mississippi Valley.
O Falcão Cinza disse que seu povo não possui relatos escritos, somente tradições orais sobre o encontro com De Soto. Segundo a tradição, seus ancestrais receberam os espanhóis com os braços abertos, inscientes da brutalidade que enfrentariam. Quando finalmente perceberam que os espanhóis queriam conquistar as terras e destruir seu modo de vida, revidaram. O Falcão Cinza acredita que explorar os montes é o caminho certo para entender como os nativos derrotaram De Soto.
What do the mounds mean to you today?
A lot of people want to talk about Columbus and to talk about the Spanish and things like that. That's where they think history starts. And these mounds are linked to a history that goes back farther than that, to show people that we were here before and we did have a culture.
So I know that there's a mound right outside. Can you actually go to it and you can tell me about it while we're standing on it?
Almost definitely. I'd like to take you out to the mound so you can see what it looks like.
Let's go.
Os montes eram a essência dos Natchez e de outras culturas. Eram reverenciados e ainda hoje são locais de cerimônias.
Wow, here we are.
Yep, this is it, mounds.
Is it okay to actually go up the mound?
It's okay, we can go up.
Because I'm assuming that this is a sacred area.
It is. It's a very spiritual, it's a very sacred area. We usually come up here to pray, and they say that our elders tell us if we pray in our own language, the Creator knows that we're still here. So I think, it'd be a nice idea for us to pray for the Mao culture. It'll take a minute or so. It's okay.
Este monte tem um significado especial para o falcão cinza. Os nativos que aqui viveram foram os últimos a sucumbir aos europeus. Os franceses os derrotaram em 1730. Para aprender mais sobre a história desse povo, vamos explorar as raízes e saber como tudo começou. Se essa foi a última aglomeração de pirâmides a resistir, gostaria de saber qual foi a primeira delas. Estamos indo para o norte, seguindo o curso do rio Mississippi até uma pequena cidade chamada Lake Mills, Wisconsin. A cidade clama ter pirâmides de pedra que supostamente teriam 5.000 anos. Se for realmente o caso, essas são as primeiras pirâmides das Américas.
This is Lake Mills, Wisconsin, a town which very much embraces their pyramids. The local motel, the liquor store, even the memorial in the town center, all reference pyramids. Looks like I came to the right place.
Lendas locais dizem que 5.000 anos atrás, este lago chamado de Rock Lake era seco. Daqui, podíamos ver as pirâmides. Fui informado de que as estruturas de pedra estão no lago e a única maneira de vê-las é mergulhando. Para encontrar a pirâmide, vamos conhecer Art Ashburn, autor de um livro sobre as pirâmides do lago Rock Lake. Usaremos o seu barco para explorar o lago. Art disse que a maior pirâmide possui somente 37 metros de comprimento. Então, utilizaremos a tecnologia moderna para ajudar-nos a encontrá-la. O computador exibirá imagens que claramente mostrarão a forma e o tamanho do monte. Sem isto, nunca saberíamos onde procurar.
Got the coordinates locked into GPS, but in the meantime, we are going to employ some new side scan sonar technology in a small package. Just came out. It allows just about anyone to be able to have high-tech equipment when they're doing some kind of search.
So we're going to have a pretty good high success rate in finding it.
Oh, absolutely. I guarantee it today.
Tentamos comparar a leitura do sonar com as coordenadas do GPS ao aproximarmos o barco da área, mas houve um problema.
I think we've got a transducer problem. We'll probably want to just use this one sonar for now.
Os computadores pareciam nos dar leituras contraditórias.
Pyramid hunting.
Quick trip to the site, not going to happen.
Right. It's not as planned, but when you have electronics, weather, and people, it never works out the way you want. So maybe kick back, enjoy the scenery, relax a little, get some sun.
So we're having electronic challenges. Our side scan sonar was just installed this morning, and it isn't quite working the way we were hoped it would. We're using another sonar in the front as well as the GPS unit, and hoping that with the right coordinates and a little bit of luck, we'll get to where we need to be. See how it goes.
A seguir, mergulharemos em águas turvas para investigar o que pode ser a pirâmide mais velha das Américas. Estou com Art Ashburn em Lake Mills, Wisconsin, investigando uma lenda centenária que diz que as pirâmides daqui foram construídas 5.000 anos atrás. Hoje, supõe-se que as pirâmides estejam submersas. Estamos tendo dificuldades em achá-las com o barco. Mas após várias horas, Art encontrou uma formação que parecia promissora.
So that bump is what we were looking for.
Absolutely. You can see that it's approximately the size that we've delved on before, so we think we nailed it this time, Josh.
Now I was expecting a pyramid like the Egyptian pyramids, which is this big pointy thing, and that looks more round to me.
Well, the imagery will fool you, but you're not going to get an Egyptian pyramid down here. What you're going to get is a longer truncated. When you go to the south end, you'll actually it'll look like a pyramid, and they'll be like a tent shape.
Para descobrir se o que vimos no sonar é realmente uma pirâmide ou apenas uma pilha natural de pedras, decidi olhar mais de perto.
Ashish, you don't want to come with us?
No way I'm going in that stuff.
No?
That's why we got an expert like Steve to take you down.
What do you know that I don't know?
It's just cold and dark, and I don't like it.
Cold and
Frio e escuridão não são problema, mas a falta de visibilidade sim. No verão, o lago fica consideravelmente turvo. Lá embaixo, a visibilidade rapidamente caiu para meros 3 metros. Eu mergulhei 8 metros e pude ver uma grande pilha de pedras, o que Art chamou de pirâmide. Algumas rochas sugerem organização, como se fossem dispostas por humanos. Mas, apenas olhando, não pude dizer se a formação foi criada por pessoas ou pela natureza. Decidi procurar artefatos ou qualquer marca que indicasse a criação humana. Mas não encontrei nada. Pelo fato do local ser considerado sagrado pelos nativos, não trouxe nenhuma pedra à superfície para pesquisas posteriores.
That was great. The surface, about the top, say 15 feet, warm, maybe 80 degrees. But once we got below, it got cold, and it got dark. And then, as I approached the rocks, I don't really have a good sense of what I actually saw. I saw a lot of rocks. I saw some cool fish, but I didn't get a sense of the shape. But here I am, in the middle of a lake, and there are rock mounds below. Go figure. Now the question is, what do they mean? How do we know that what is down below the water is actually man-made and not nature-made?
Well, first we want to go to the Indian native legends and stories about what lays at the bottom of this lake. So certainly what we found corroborates these legends. The second is the geological evidence certainly points to the fact that they're not glacial in nature, but they are indeed man-made. And the third thing we can point to, we found similar type structures throughout the Midwest. They're on dry land, this is underwater, but the structures are fairly identical.
Art teceu comentários interessantes, mas acho que preciso de outra opinião. Contatei a Associação de Arqueologia Subaquática de Wisconsin e marquei uma reunião com o diretor, o Dr. Dick Boyd.
I wanted to talk because I heard some compelling but not convincing evidence.
Yes.
About these formations in the bottom of the lake being man-made. And I've heard there's a lot of controversy, and there's another side to the story, and you represent the other side.
That's correct. I believe that these are glacial structures. We are in an area where the glacier 13,000 years ago deposited all kinds of strange rock structures and formations around the shores as well as in the lake.
How is it, though, that a glacier can make that kind of structure?
It would usually be produced within the glacier itself.
Dick disse que quando há uma fissura na geleira, a água penetra e molda uma cavidade em forma de sino dentro da massa de gelo. Com o tempo, areia e detritos ficam presos no interior e quando a geleira derrete, deixa uma pilha de pedra que lembra uma pirâmide. Dick me mostrou que tipo de rochas estava tocando durante o mergulho. Ele acredita que são as mesmas rochas produzidas pela geleira que cobre a área de Wisconsin. Dick e Art têm bons argumentos para apoiar suas teorias, mas nenhum deles possui evidências sólidas.
But it sounds like this mystery of whether or not the pyramids of Rock Lake were man-made or glacially made is going to remain.
Yes.
And it probably adds to the allure of this lake. But I'm looking for an uncontested, undisputed, man-made oldest pyramid. Where would I go to find the oldest pyramid?
Well, in order to do that, you're going to have to take a trip to the deep south into Louisiana and go to a place called Poverty Point.
Decidi seguir o conselho do Dr. Boyd. Fui para o sul, seguindo o Mississippi, para investigar a pirâmide em Louisiana. No trecho final, preferi chegar da mesma forma que os nativos americanos o fizeram, com uma canoa.
For thousands of years, the pyramid builders used rivers and streams like this one as their principal mode of transportation. Paddling their canoes, they traveled up and down the Mississippi River, trading along the way with other native cultures.
Pedi ao arqueólogo T.R. Kidder, da Universidade de Washington, em St. Louis, para me encontrar na margem do rio. Ele disse que pode mostrar a pirâmide mais velha dos Estados Unidos.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Okay. There you go. Welcome to Poverty Point. There you go.
I'll take that. So, would this place have looked like this when the natives were trading here?
Yes, it really probably would have looked a lot like this. I think most of its dead vegetation would have probably been gone, used for wood, firewood, things like that.
Sure.
But basically, yeah, it looks pretty much the same, I think.
Nice. It's thick.
It is. It's very thick, and that means that you're going to have to use the machete to get up.
Oh, we're bushwhacking, huh?
There we go. We're on our way.
Okay.
So you ready? We'll head on that way.
Cool.
Poverty Point foi construída em um banco natural de 15 metros de altura acima de um afluente do rio Mississippi. Estamos fazendo o mesmo trajeto de um comerciante nativo da época, tentando evitar os crocodilos, cobras e outros animais perigosos.
Oh, watch out, right here, there's a whole mess of fire ants.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to move quickly through that spot.
Yeah, it's going to get easier, I promise.
I don't doubt it. Fire ants, poison ivy, brambles. It's fun. Tiny.
Pequenas formigas geralmente não me preocupam, mas 30 segundos após ser picado, tive uma forte reação alérgica. Meu corpo ficou coberto de eczemas e o rosto inchou. Apliquei uma dose de adrenalina para ajudar a aliviar os sintomas. Mas, em vez disso, meu estado piorou. Comecei a respirar com dificuldade. Meu peito doía. Decidi interromper a jornada e ir ao hospital. Precisei de medicamentos pesados para evitar que as toxinas interrompessem minha jornada permanentemente. Estou em um hospital na Louisiana sendo tratado de uma severa reação alérgica ao ataque de formigas. Em campo, tive dificuldade para respirar, náusea e eczemas.
Chest pain's coming back.
Felizmente, tinha o kit de primeiros socorros comigo e apliquei uma dose de adrenalina e anti-histamínico em minutos. Mas não foi o suficiente para reverter a reação, então fui ao hospital. 4 horas após a picada, os sintomas diminuíram e eu estava me sentindo muito melhor. Segundo o Dr. Tucker, a rápida intervenção em campo salvou minha vida.
Your reaction was really serious. It's a severe reaction, and if you hadn't taken the epinephrine and the pill, yeah, you could have died from it.
Die?
Um choque anafilático como o que tive pode matar em minutos. Os medicamentos que utilizei deram-me tempo para chegar ao hospital. A maioria das pessoas não consegue. Naquela noite, tive de ficar em observação. Ao amanhecer, estava me sentindo melhor, pronto para continuar minha jornada.
Got a clean bill of health and I'm good to go back. So now it's just a matter of finding TR and picking things up where we left off. Thanks again, everyone.
Ao voltar, comecei a pesquisar quando os nativos americanos começaram a construir grandes estruturas de terra ao longo do Mississippi. Viajei a Wisconsin para investigar o que alguns dizem ser a mais antiga pirâmide dos Estados Unidos, mas não encontrei nenhuma evidência contundente. Estou na Louisiana com o arqueólogo T.R. Kidder, que alega poder mostrar incontestavelmente a maior e mais antiga pirâmide dos Estados Unidos. Ele disse que Poverty Point foi construída por nativos em 1700 a.C.
How many people lived here?
We don't know exactly, but probably 1,000 to 3,000 permanent residents.
Pretty big.
Yeah, at that time it was the biggest site in all of North America and possibly the biggest site in all of the Americas.
Wow, that's impressive.
I think so. I think it's probably the first American civilization when you think about it. These people had monumental architecture, they had trade and exchange, complex political organization, all the kinds of things that we think of with sort of civilized society except for writing.
Did they create objects or artifacts that archaeologists have found here?
Yeah, there are lots of them, and I've got some that I can show you in a little while when we get up to the mount.
That'd be great.
T.R. me conduziu ao monte mais alto, com 21 metros de altura.
It's a big mound.
Yeah, it is. It's probably the second or third largest mound in all of North America.
No topo, T.R. mostrou os artefatos encontrados no local. Pontas de flecha variadas e pedaços de cerâmica de lugares distantes como Wisconsin.
So how far did this travel?
I'm going to say about 200, 250 miles.
Long ways.
This one is from either Illinois or possibly Indiana, so maybe about 300, 350 miles.
Wow.
300.
As evidências provam que este era o centro de uma grande rede de comércio. T.R. disse que esta foi a primeira grande comunidade de nativos americanos construtores de montes. Após observar 2 montes, perguntei a T.R. como os nativos construíram estas grandes estruturas.
Well, we think that they're probably doing it in several different ways. One is they're using things like digging sticks. They didn't have a lot of stone, remember, so that they're probably using wooden tools to dig the earth out. And then what they're doing is they're probably piling it together in baskets like this, in hide containers. And so what you do is you carry it in, you dump it over.
T.R. estima que os nativos utilizaram 20 milhões de cestos com 23 quilos de terra nesta pirâmide. Tudo foi transportado e despejado à mão.
Wow. That's a lot of work.
It's an incredible amount of work.
So you haven't actually tried to build them out from scratch?
No, I've never done that.
Well, I got an idea. I'm going to use a little modern technology to see what it would be like to make a mound.
Para ter uma ideia do que é mover toneladas de terra, decidi construir minha própria pirâmide. Mas, em vez de utilizar os cestos, usarei a tecnologia atual. O homem no comando destas máquinas é Charles Poole. Ele está feliz em me ajudar nesta busca.
So if I want to build a mound, right here in the middle, that's the machine I want to use?
That's the machine you'd use modern days, yes.
And it's okay with you if I do it?
Yes.
And I can drive?
Yes.
Perfect. Why don't you load me up?
All right, here's your hard hat.
Okay.
Your safety vest.
Okay.
And a little communication.
Great. Man, that thing is huge. Let's see. Get this thing on. Look at this wheel. Huge! It's this big! Let's see how it goes.
Charles me deu as chaves de um brinquedo de 32 toneladas e 485 cavalos de força. Uma enorme máquina de terraplenagem. Segundos depois, já estava aprendendo como encher o compartimento de terra. A máquina literalmente raspa a terra do chão e armazena em um compartimento. Para despejar a terra, o fundo do compartimento se move para frente.
That's good. Now hit your crowd, Josh. Crowd it out. Crowd the dirt out, man. Dropping my load.
O compartimento tem capacidade para mais de 24 metros cúbicos de terra. Para um nativo, seria o equivalente a 1.800 cestos com 23 quilos de terra. Levou um tempo, mas gradualmente o monte começou a tomar forma.
So I'm taking a break and letting the pros do it. But let me tell you what it feels like when you're in there. You've got this huge machine, just this massive machine and this tremendous load of dirt. While you're trying to empty it, you've got to be careful of how that load is managed. If you push it out too fast, you'll get stuck. Too slow, and it drags out too long. It's a lot. It's a lot to do. These guys impress me. What also impresses me is just how quickly this works. The mound builders had nothing going on like this. It was one basket at a time. But my goal here is to see how quickly we can move massive amounts of earth to make our own mound.
Até o cair da noite, não havíamos terminado. É incrível pensar que após todo este trabalho, utilizando as maiores máquinas da atualidade, não tenhamos chegado nem perto do que os nativos fizeram.
Well, you weren't kidding. We ran out of light. That was great.
Yes.
That was incredible.
Yeah.
Man, this thing moves a lot of earth.
Yes, now I guess we can appreciate what the Indians did back years ago trying to build their mounds, huh?
Just how hard it is. I mean, how big is this mound? How tall is it, do you think?
10 foot tall and probably 100 foot long.
Para construir um monte deste tamanho, os nativos devem ter utilizado 85 mil cestos de terra. Para construir um morro de 21 metros de altura como o Poverty Point com estas máquinas, Charles estimou que levaria quase um mês.
This definitely gives me a sense of just how much work went into building these mounds.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
A seguir, o maior monte de todos, Cahokia. Está na hora de irmos do mais velho para o maior monte dos Estados Unidos. Não há melhor maneira de observá-lo do que dos céus. Em 1539, a tentativa dos espanhóis de colonizar os Estados Unidos falhou. Estamos em busca do porquê. Nosso objetivo agora é descobrir por que os montes foram construídos e que relação tem com os espanhóis. A resposta pode estar na capital do Império Mississippiano, Cahokia, próxima a St. Louis, Missouri.
This is Cahokia. It was the New York City of its time, the very center of the Mississippian Empire. And the best way to see it all is from the sky.
Para chegar lá, chamei meus bons amigos, Bubba Peters e Eric Dufour.
Morning, guys.
Morning, Josh.
Bubba, good to see you again. Eric, morning. Great to see you.
Vou voar com um parapente motorizado. Trata-se de um paraquedas com um motor amarrado às minhas costas.
Radio check, can you hear me? Now better?
Yeah,
Can you hear yourself also?
I got it. Perfect.
As condições meteorológicas precisam estar perfeitas para o voo. Hoje, estão quase. Não há vento, o que pode dificultar a decolagem.
Okay, step back now. Step back, you're good? Yes. Power, 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 power. Go now, go, go, go. Stop.
I can keep running.
Too much running, not enough running. That's okay.
There's no wind, which means I have to run a little bit on that one. I stopped running.
Vou tentar de novo, e desta vez não vou parar de correr até o parapente me levantar do chão.
Bring it up. Use your power. Power, 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 power. Go, 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 go. Left, slowly. Full power, left, Josh, left, hold it. Slowly. Hold it. Straight. Good shot.
We could have used more wind, but the wind is not there. So that's pretty good for Josh to be able to do that. Because he's a young pilot. For an experienced pilot, it's not much of a problem, but it's very difficult conditions.
Agora que estou voando, vou explorar o local de cima.
This is great. I can see all the mountains really well from up here.
Olhando Cahokia dos céus ajuda a colocar o seu tamanho em perspectiva. Os montes foram construídos em aproximadamente 16 quilômetros quadrados. Eles variam em forma e altura. Voando sobre o maior, não pude deixar de pensar no trabalho que tiveram para construí-lo.
I'm at 175 feet right now. That mountain's pretty darn high.
Os mississippianos de Cahokia devem ter sido um povo organizado e determinado para construir uma cidade deste tamanho.
Come back left. Come back again into the wind. Very good. Don't move. Okay, shut it off. Light, right, and hold. Light. Very light. Wait. Perfect. Wait. Don't move. Full brake. Full brake.
Go away. That was a trip, man. That was a trip. Not sure where Bubba is, but there's this big mound, which is beautiful from above. And then there's a bunch. There's this one here, which we can see, and there's some on the other side. There's a lot of different heights, a lot of different sizes. Great from above, but from down here, my question now is, what does it all mean? That's what I gotta find out.
Me encontrei com John Kelly, arqueólogo da Universidade de Washington em St. Louis, para saber se os descendentes do povo que aqui viveu teriam a habilidade para derrotar De Soto no século XVI. Ele disse que os Cahokia atingiram o ápice no ano de 1100 d.C., com uma população de mais de 50 mil residentes. Foi a maior cidade nativa dos Estados Unidos. O local possui centenas de montes, cada um refletindo o status da pessoa que vivia em seu topo. A hierarquia era expressa pela localização e o tamanho do monte.
The Central Plaza, correct?
Correct.
Is there a relationship between the people who had these mounds and their location on the plaza?
Yeah, these are the people that had the highest status within the community, either in terms of their religious position or their social position.
And the closer they were to this plaza, the more important they were.
Exactly. You said you had built a mound at Poverty Point with machines?
I had some help, yeah.
You had some help. Well, we're going to let you try the way they did it in the past with this 50-pound basket of earth. And I'm going to help you load it up, and you're going to go up to the top.
Go up to the top.
John escolheu 3 montes para eu escalar. Ele disse que cada um deles tem uma história diferente.
Grab the strap.
Yep.
Pull that over your shoulder.
O primeiro monte é bem na praça.
Yeah. I'll see you at the top.
Okay.
John disse que este cesto é quase idêntico ao usado pelos nativos. Até a corda foi feita com plantas locais.
Hello?
Hi, you made it.
I did.
Now let me grab that.
Thank you. How high? Yeah, how high is this one?
This is about 20 feet high.
20 feet. Okay, and this is one of the smaller mounds that I can see.
Yeah, this is one of the smaller ones on the Grand Plaza, and so it represents an individual that had status, but he was a much lower status in the whole pecking order of the social structure.
So the person who lived here had a lot of status, but not as much as maybe the guy over there.
Exactly.
Well, I'm gonna go climb that one.
Well, let's go do it.
All right. Here we go. Number 2. All right, John. Here I come.
Este monte é muito maior do que o primeiro. O cesto fica mais pesado a cada passo. Agora sinto a dificuldade em construir um monte deste tamanho.
Almost there. This one's a little bit bigger.
Se o tamanho simbolizava status, o criador deste monte deve ter sido muito poderoso.
Just a few more feet. Let me grab it.
There you got it. Oh, yes. Thank you. Oh. So this one's higher, for sure.
Yeah, it's about 40 feet high.
So twice as high as that one.
Exactly.
And huge.
Yeah,
a lot bigger.
Yeah, you got a lot of surface space on top, so you can put lots of buildings.
This meant that this person had more status than that person.
Exactly, and they had a lot more command of labor, you know, in the hundreds of people, maybe in the thousands, who knows. And the highest ranking person is straight to the northeast.
With the big mound.
The big mound, so that's 100 feet. So you ready for that challenge?
That's the one I gotta do next.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
A meio caminho do topo, reconheci o poder da pessoa que viveu aqui. Ela deve ter comandado uma grande e organizada força de trabalho para construir algo assim. Esta é uma missão desafiadora. Gostaria de saber o que poderia ter motivado seus homens a trabalhar tão duro.
Almost there. 99.
100. You made it.
I did.
Excellent. Turn around.
All right.
I'll get this off of you.
Okay.
Now you ready to go back down? Get another basket? No?
I thought we didn't talk for a while.
Okay.
So, this is the Grand Poobah's, the chief's place.
Yes.
John disse que o chefe tinha uma casa enorme, a cerca de 12 metros de altura, de onde governava seu povo. Havia um mastro no meio do monte que simbolizava o centro do mundo em que viviam. O monte era um ícone político e espiritual. O chefe era mais do que um governante. Seu povo acreditava que ele descendia do sol. O monte era o local aonde as pessoas vinham para venerar e rezar. Cahokia foi construída em menos de 150 anos. Em seu ápice, Cahokia abrangia uma área de mais de 129 quilômetros quadrados, mas sua influência se estendia por mais centenas de quilômetros.
Beyond the practical benefits of creating housing platforms, could the chief motivate these tens of thousands of people to do something else like warfare?
Yes, very much so, because this was all integrated in their cosmology.
Okay.
He was looked at as a warrior. Chief was able to mobilize a significant number of individuals for warfare. And we see that with the construction of the palisade that surrounds the core area of the site at about 1200 AD.
Can you show me the palisades?
Yes, let's look down here. You can see a reconstruction of the palisade.
Oh, wow. Okay.
As paliçadas cercavam a área central de Cahokia. A cerca se estendia por mais de 3 quilômetros ao redor do maior monte e da praça, defendendo a parte mais sagrada da comunidade.
What about weapons? Did they find any weapons around the area?
Yes, at 1200 we see a significant increase in the number of projectiles. Even though the bow and arrow had been around for several hundred years, the importance as a weapon, both not only for hunting but also for killing people in warfare, was a significant part of what was going on, and is very closely linked to the construction of the palisade. That was for shooting at people from a distance. However, for close-in warfare, you could take the clubs such as this and use that.
Okay, here, I'll trade you.
Okay.
So this was for hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
So what would happen if De Soto and his army, these conquistadors, would actually come up to the Mississippians, who are, looks like, very well fortified and very well armed? What happens?
Well, I suspect they would have been doomed.
Doomed?
With the number of people here and their ability to organize and even take on the kind of armament that the Spaniards had, I think they would have had a tough time of it.
Felizmente para os espanhóis, os conquistadores chegaram 200 anos após o declínio de Cahokia. No entanto, os nativos descendentes ainda constituíam uma grande população, tinham chefes competentes e meios para conduzir uma guerra. Então, como foi possível De Soto durar tanto após ter atingido o Vale do Mississippi? O que deu a vantagem temporária aos espanhóis? A seguir, vamos para o Arkansas conhecer um perito em De Soto e experimentar as armas de ambos os lados, dos espanhóis e dos nativos.
It actually broke through the chainmail. I wasn't expecting that.
Seria a tecnologia a razão dos índios não terem expulsado imediatamente os conquistadores? Estamos no sítio arqueológico Parkin, no Arkansas, onde Jeff Meacham concordou em nos ajudar a resolver este mistério. Primeiro, ele me fez atirar com uma espingarda espanhola do século XVI chamada Arquebus.
Wow. I bet that would intimidate the natives, huh?
It was very effective in scaring the Indians, but the problem was that it took so long to load that they found that actually they weren't of use in a pitched battle.
Os espanhóis não trouxeram somente espingardas. Também tinham muitas outras armas nunca vistas pelos nativos, como espadas de aço, bestas e, o mais importante, equinos. O cavalo era a arma psicológica mais poderosa do arsenal espanhol. Era estranha aos nativos. Eles não sabiam como enfrentar as grandes feras. A reação natural era fugir, dando ao lanceiro um alvo perfeito. Se o cavalo era a principal arma dos espanhóis, estou curioso para descobrir o que os nativos tinham.
Primary weapon was the bow and arrow. Many of their bows were made of a type of wood called bowdark. It's a very strong wood and it's very good for use in bows.
So that's the bow. What about the arrows?
The arrows are usually made of cane and they're tipped with stone tips, and then they're of course fletched with feathers. Sure. And these were very accurate. They had quite a distance on them and also a lot of power.
What about armor? If the Spanish have metal to make weapons, couldn't they also have made armor that would withstand a bow and arrow?
Yes, and a lot of the members of the De Soto expedition, when they first arrived, they had chain mail. But they quickly found out that the chain mail had several disadvantages.
Jeff simulou teste de armas para vermos a eficiência da malha de metal contra a flecha dos nativos.
Wow. But this is interesting that it actually broke through the chainmail. I wasn't expecting that.
That obviously demonstrates that the chainmail would not be effective against the Mississippian arrows.
And why is that? Is that because chainmail was designed for other uses?
Yeah, it was primarily made for protecting against sword blows. This would actually help absorb a lot of the shock and keep you from getting cut.
But the direct impact of an arrow would just pierce the armor.
Absolutely.
So realizing this, did the Spanish do anything?
Many of them had quilted armor that they'd actually picked up in Mexico and brought with them, and they knew from experience that that would protect against arrows.
Do you have any quilted armor?
Yes, we do, and we can experiment with some of that as well.
Let's reset and give it a shot.
Got him.
2 good belly shots again. Wow, very interesting.
So your second one made it through a little bit.
Yeah, but it didn't get through this one.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be lethal.
So it'd just be like a good hit in the stomach. That hurt.
It's a lot better than having it go all the way through you.
Yeah.
O teste prova que a arma mais poderosa dos mississippianos não era eficaz contra os coletes espanhóis e demonstra que os conquistadores tinham como vantagem a tecnologia e a psicologia. Então, como os nativos, sendo inferiores em todos os aspectos bélicos, conseguiram expulsar os espanhóis? Jeff me levou para um rio próximo. Ele disse que no terceiro ano da expedição, o líder dos conquistadores, Hernando de Soto, morreu de febre e foi jogado no rio. Após a sua morte, os membros da expedição, cansados depois de 3 anos de constantes batalhas com os nativos, sem encontrar ouro nem prata, decidiram partir para o México. Eles derreteram as armas de fogo para produzir pregos e construir barcos com capacidade para 50 homens. Roubaram canoas para transportar os cavalos pelo rio Mississippi.
Once they set out on the river, they had lost any sort of military or tactical advantage that they had. And also they were really disheartened. They had given up, and their idea was just to get out by that time.
So how do the Mississippians play into this?
When the boats finally set sail down the Mississippi, there were well over 100 canoes full of warriors out there, Mississippian warriors. Some of these canoes were huge. A few of them held as many as 60 to 70 people.
As crônicas espanholas retratam o fato como um espetáculo impressionante. A frota de canoas representava uma séria ameaça.
The Indians followed them and were constantly giving them barrages of arrows, 24 hours a day too, so the Spaniards couldn't rest.
Os nativos alinharam-se às margens do rio. Se os espanhóis tentassem desembarcar, seriam detidos por um mar de flechas.
It sounds like the conquistadors, who are cutting this swath of destruction from Florida all the way through to Arkansas, get here and they finally met their match. Here's this organized society. They have hierarchies. They're building these huge mounds. They understand warfare. And when the Spanish are at their weakest, the epic journey comes to an end.
No decorrer de 3 anos, os conquistadores perderam metade de seus homens, incluindo o líder e herói nacional Hernando de Soto. A viagem dos 300 espanhóis sobreviventes até o Golfo do México durou 19 dias. A vitória foi considerada monumental pelos mississippianos. Esta civilização americana durou mais de 3.000 anos. O porquê de Cahokia ter sucumbido continua um mistério. As teorias variam de secas e guerras até instabilidade política. Hoje, tudo o que restou dessa complexa e espetacular sociedade são essas pirâmides cobertas de grama. Testemunhas silenciosas de um império nativo que um dia governou o solo americano.